Okay, we're back. Regarding what Rich was saying, between February 2004 and February 2010, 1,225 firearms and 3 explosive background checks for people on terrorist watch lists were processed through the federal background check system. Of these, 91% of the firearm transactions and 100% of the explosive transactions were allowed. So in other words, all these rules, all these laws, all these things we have in place to so-called get the guns out of the bad guys' hands don't work. So why do we need more? Amy, what you got, girl?
Well, I'm listening and I'm thinking, and the wheels are spinning, and I'm wondering about these accusations of red flags. Every time there's a push to take your guns away, they have these mass shootings, and then there's these people that come up and they give you statistics. There weren't so many shell casings from Orlando. They didn't find enough shell casings, and the guy that had the rifle didn't have enough time to load it. And those kinds of bits and pieces of data that people say, well, this is just a red flag so they can take our guns. Do you think that has anything to do with the agenda to change our constitutional rights to carry?
Yeah, I think you mean false flag, right? Red flag just means like a warning. False flags.
Yeah, they call them both, but you're right, false flag.
Okay, yeah, absolutely, and who knows, when things like this happen, they're never properly at least investigated as far as I'm concerned, and people they jump to conclusions. They're selective on the information that they put out, and then also they put out disinformation, which is really wild and radical because they want people saying the wrong things to look stupid, and so they're going to be able to fall back and say, well, this person's saying that they were using all kinds of different machine guns. There had to be different people there, but obviously that's not true. And if you say something like that, then you're a flake. And it may be true, it may not be true. But you never know, because the information that we're given is given to us by the news people who are basically controlled or in the same. I don't say controlled; they're all the same, out of the same bolt of cloth. The government and the news media are one and the same.
Yeah, now I've noticed too that all of these instances are changing. First, the mass shootings were done by people that were on pharmaceutical drugs, and now they're all extreme Muslims, jihadists and so forth. I see, different political flips on all of these things that are occurring too. Do you think that has anything to do with the big push for the Democrats to win our guns?
It could. I mean, just it's a little bit different. I was just talking to Chuck earlier about this. Is if you go to Fox News, which is they're still liberal, and they've got a 7% holdings by the Prince of Saudi Arabia. That said, they're the most conservative and straightforward of all the news organizations, and they tonight had the story about how Guccifer 2, not the Guccifer, but the second Guccifer, hacked the DNC website and got into their computers and got all this information on Hillary and what they're planning to do to Trump. But if you go to any of the other major news organizations that are the more liberal ones, I mean, that's an understatement, but I looked tonight, ABC and CNN had nothing, not even a side note. And so it just goes to show you that most people, unless you watch Fox News, you're not going to get anything but the most slanted to the left. And then getting back to what you're saying, if the government, obviously the government, well, obviously, I believe, and there's plenty of evidence that the government and the news organizations work hand in glove, and anything that we're told, I mean, I wouldn't believe anyway. But if the more independent research you get, eventually you're going to start putting things together. So I suggest, just doing what any good researcher does, and just go and don't go to the major news sources. Go to the independents and the people that are actually trying to get the news out on their own, and then you can start developing at least a fact pattern that's plausible.
Yeah. Well, that was all interesting. Chuck, I was going to bring up women that carry. I'm going to be getting a small weapon that I can carry. What do you guys suggest for us women that don't have a lot of experience when we go and buy a gun? I mean, I'm going to hang up and let you answer that, but I don't know where to start. So there's probably a lot of people like me listening that would like to get some kind of an idea of where do we start? What kind of a weapon do we look for? Those kinds of things that would be really a benefit.
Okay, well, my feeling on this has always been the same. Start with something that is of a relatively low caliber, whether you be a man or woman. Like I said, I used to carry a .32, which is, by today's standards, pretty low caliber. And before that, I had a .22, actually. And the kickback and all the rest is not nearly as great as with a .45 or whatever Magnum. But certainly you learn how to handle a gun, and they're not that expensive. And to me, it's like Ray said, just having a gun, just carrying a gun, gives you a whole different perspective on self-defense, on being aware. You become almost instantaneously more aware of your surroundings. You realize the threat, that's why you bought the gun. And just the presence of a gun, like Ray said, you don't have to always blow people away into 1,000 pieces for the gun to be totally effective in what you want to accomplish, and that is self-defense.
Now, I have a different opinion, but it's not markedly different. I think if anybody, just general rule, any woman or a guy that has no experience with firearms, get yourself, it's either Smith & Wesson, Taurus, any good quality 5-shot, .38 special that'll shoot plus P ammunition, and then and in a hammerless, double action only. That means it doesn't have a hammer to cock back. You just pull the trigger. It's a revolver, but they're light. They're and a .38 special is not going to hurt your hand. It is going to recoil, but it's not going to be enough to scare anybody. It's also going to be a weapon or a bullet that has some stopping power. I mean, it's not going to knock someone to a wall, but the gun itself, even if it's a .22, even if it's a pellet gun, it's going to have a deterrent effect. Sure. If you point anything at somebody and they're going to flinch, they're not going to want anything to do with it. So, and really important. And years ago, back in the 80s, I remember a story where a woman she pulled a gun out and she had a 5-shot revolver, and she fired all 5 shots in the air to warn the guy. Guess what? So if you're going to shoot, never fire a warning shot. Police will tell you never fire a warning shot. When you go to a CCW class, never fire a warning shot, because first of all, warning shots, all they do is make a lot of noise, but they really don't, and they don't really warn. They just make noise. And they'll teach you in those classes too. You aim for the center of mass, and you aim. Cops don't shoot people in the leg to wound them. If a cop shoots you in the leg or in the arm, it says he missed. They go for the center of mass.
Yeah, that's in fact, I was in the court one day in between trials, and I heard a judge and a prosecutor talking about going for headshots. And anyone that's experienced in the military or whatever, if you're going to be shooting at heads, get ready to die. Shoot for the biggest part of the body. Well,
if the guy's unarmed, you can shoot headshots.
Well, yeah, if he's unarmed and laying on the ground. But again, your whole objective is self-defense. And if you shoot somebody, a .38 is the weapon I carry, a Taurus special. I've had it since '91. And something to keep in mind, it's not always only the robbers and the bad guys, the killers. It's the mountain lions, it's the rattlesnakes. It's all those critters that might want to do us harm. So we often forget there is an absolute valid need for a weapon to protect yourself. Not just the government, not just the bad guys, but also
Right,
things that threaten you.
As you get experience, you get your CCW or just buy your first gun. You know, like I say, if it's a snub nose, they are not accurate, but they're accurate enough up to about 30 feet. And as you get more experience, buy that longer barreled weapon. And that I mean, I have a Smith & Wesson Model 19's 357 Magnum, and I took a buddy out. Wes White used to work here in town at the DA's office. We went out shooting, and I put 6 rounds in a 6-inch group at 50 yards, and that's pretty good for a pistol.
Okay, folks, we got 3 minutes left, so I don't know if we can take a call in between, but let me just read you something. As I said in the previous show, I was accused of a crime of hitting golf balls at my neighbors, and the way it happened...
But you were using explosive golf balls.
Yeah, explosive golf balls. And the way it happened is there was a knock on the door. I thought it was the person that was there from the neighbors about a half an hour earlier. No one announced themselves, and I opened the door with my .38 in my back pocket. And lo and behold, it was a police officer who was talking on her shoulder thing. And she said, after she was done talking with whoever at NCSO, I said, "Can I help you, officer?" And she said, "Yeah, you can quit hitting golf balls at your neighbors." Anyway, she wrote in the police report, and I quote, "It was at that time when I went over to the address to speak with Mr. Augustin. Upon contact with Mr. Augustin at the front door, I asked him if he would come outside and speak with me. That never happened. Mr. Augustin did so, but before he did, he quickly reached behind to the small of his back and removed the revolver from his lower back area, stating he should probably take this off, then set it down on the table next to the door. It should be noted that this was not the action that of a prudent, caring person, as said person would advise the deputy that they have a firearm on their person and where. Then they would have the deputy remove it for them for officer safety reasons."
Is that when you slap your knee and you get the canned laughter?
Now this is on absolutely at the front door of my own 5-acre property, and I'm being told I should have just threw my hands in the air and said, "Officer, officer." Now, what she's referring to is a requirement for concealed carry, that you identify you have a weapon. But for this to be said about someone that's on his own property, and especially the situation I was in with my neighbors,
Right.
It's absurd to the umpth degree.
Well, and that kind of commentary shouldn't even be in a police report. It's ridiculous because, in other words, she's trying to, this particular deputy is trying to dictate on what kind of behavior a person has in their own home.
Yeah. Okay, we're going to go to break. Thanks. We'll have the final segment coming up.